anti-war demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War in mass marches, rallies, and demonstrations. Central Park is the starting point for the parade to the UN building. The estimated 125,000 Manhattan marchers include students, housewives, beatnik poets, doctors, businessmen, teachers, priests, and nuns. Makeup and costumes were bizarre. Before the parade, mass draft card burning was urged. Demonstrators claimed 200 cards were burned, but no accurate count could be determined. Reporters and onlookers were jostled away on purpose. Although mostly peaceful, shouted confrontations were frequent and fiery during the course of the march. The anti-war marchers were picketed by anti-war marchers who were hawkish toward the parading doves. Civil rights leader Martin Luther King leads the procession to the United Nations, where he urges UN pressure to force the U.S. to stop bombing North Vietnam.
The 1960s were the most turbulent decade in American history. That turbulence emerged from several events and several factors. It was during the 1960s that the United States intervened deeper and deeper into the Vietnam War. That war became increasingly unpopular as it was escalated, as the government explained. At the same time, young people especially began to revolt against being controlled by traditional values, by bureaucratic institutions, whether they be governmental or colleges and universities or corporate America. The decade was a period of liberation movements, the civil rights movement, promoting equal rights for African Americans, inspired a whole array of liberation movements across the United States. Women's rights benefited from the civil rights movement. Gay rights also benefited from the example and the energy and the momentum and even the tactics of the civil rights movement. The anti-war movement drew upon the civil rights movement. So in many respects, the civil rights movement of the 1960s became the animating element of a much broader liberationist movement that expressed itself in a colorful array of experiences and attitudes and new values that brought great turbulence to American society, but also great energy and great idealism. In some respects, it was the ideals and the energies of these various liberation movements of the 1960s that ended up causing Richard Nixon to make some fundamental mistakes and commit crimes that led to the downfall of his presidency. It was the Nixon administration, which was elected in 1968 and took office in 1969, that claimed it was trying to find a way to end the Vietnam War with honor. But by bombing Cambodia in 1970, it only reignited all of the anti-war energies on campus and elsewhere, and actually led Nixon to become more and more paranoid about the power of these liberationist forces in American society. And when George McGovern became the Democratic nominee for the presidency in 1972, McGovern quite intentionally recruited to his campaign effort many of these same youthful idealists and activists who had been involved with the civil rights movement, with the feminist movement, with the gay rights movement. That only exacerbated Nixon's paranoia about his own political stability and led to the incredible mistake of Watergate, which brought the downfall of the Nixon administration and the first removal of an American president from office.
Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, I have felt it was my duty to persevere, to make every possible effort to complete the term of office to which you elected me. In the past few days, however, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort. As long as there was such a base, I felt strongly that it was necessary to see the constitutional process through to its conclusion, that to do otherwise would be unfaithful to the spirit of that deliberately difficult process, and a dangerously destabilizing precedent for the future. But with the disappearance of that base, I now believe that the constitutional purpose has been served, and there is no longer a need for the process to be prolonged. I would have preferred to carry through to the finish, whatever the personal agony it would have involved. And my family unanimously urged me to do so. But the interests of the nation must always come before any personal considerations. From the discussions I have had with congressional and other leaders, I have concluded that because of the Watergate matter, I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require. I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.